Since the last 2002 Davos session, I think there have been some changes and some issues in security that are still the same. Obviously, there still is the war on Al-Qaeda, the war on terrorism that has been fought steadily and consistently since that time. But there are a couple of new issues on the security agenda that are very ripe, very intense. The first of those, obviously, is the potential for war in Iraq and the aftermath of such a war if it does happen. And the new and most recent crisis is the challenge North Korea has posed to the international community by throwing the international inspectors out of the Yongbyon reactor and pulling out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And underlying all of this is another year in which the situation in the Middle East has deteriorated further. So as a general matter, those are the four areas we're going to touch on, but some of the panelists may want to add to that, and you're obviously welcome to ask questions.
I'd start with the Arab-Israeli Middle East situation as the most urgent one, in the sense that people are dying here and now, not just prospectively, that the inability or unwillingness to resolve an issue that is resolvable is having a serious dragging effect on the effectiveness of the continuing war against global terror. And so the third reason, I guess, that if assault against Iraq does occur, the terribly unhappy condition of the Israel-Palestine situation means that the consequences, the destabilizing consequences of such an assault are probably going to be much greater than if the Arab-Israeli issue was being worked through in the way that it can be with a serious US-led international initiative. So far as Iraq itself is concerned, obviously, and that's the nightmare, that full-fledged war that we're all worried about, I'm still perhaps naive enough to think that war there is avoidable for, again, perhaps three reasons. First of all, Saddam's survival instinct, as it's being encouraged in particular by his regional neighbours. Secondly, the pressure that is coming from so many parts of the international community, at least not to go to war unilaterally without far more evidence of default than we've had so far and without UN endorsement. And I think there's a third reason, Karl Rove's wet finger, the assessment of domestic political environment in the United States, which is far less enthusiastic for war than some of the rhetoric coming out of Washington might have the rest of the world believe.
I think the administration is struggling to try to pursue its agenda vis-a-vis the terrorist threat and certainly vis-a-vis Iraq, and yet at the same time launch what it's calling an engagement with the Muslim world that puts some emphasis on the enduring and more positive cultural, political, social, economic relations that exist between the United States and different parts of the Muslim world. My strong impression is that it's not working, in the sense that there's great skepticism across the Muslim world that the United States can, on the one hand, put the imminence of action against Iraq on its agenda and yet expect people to be receptive to ideas of more enduring long-term engagement with the vast majority of Muslims, of course, who don't participate in any kind of violent activity.
We have a situation basically where two leaderships, Palestinian leadership, that of Yasser Arafat, the Israeli leadership of Ariel Sharon, and lesser or secondary leaderships, the leaderships, for instance, of particular Palestinian militant factions, of particular parties, especially on the nationalist right in Israel, are all contributing to a situation in which they are not willing to depart from their current strategies, which elevate the use of violence as a means of politics. All these leaderships see the costs of departing from their current strategy to an alternative one that is a more proactive, constructive strategy of making peace as far too costly in the immediate term in terms of domestic alliances and consensuses. And neither Arafat nor Sharon nor the Fatah leadership nor the Likud leadership and so on are willing to incur the immediate costs of a departure.
For the immediate term, talking about my own country specifically, I worry a great deal about the impact on Muslims, including in my country, if the United States were to go to Iraq unilaterally without a UN sanction. If there is a UN sanction, I think my government would be able to tell the people there that this is an internationally endorsed action. Therefore, it would take the sting out of that action. But if the US were to go unilaterally, I'm afraid that there will be huge demonstrations on the street, and there will be, this perceptions increasing Islamic radicalism. And this, for us, is not just a threat to our external relations, but for me, for people in Indonesia, this is in fact a greater threat to our domestic security.
I think anti-Americanism is a structural issue. It's out there because of the disproportionate amount of power that the United States possesses. You're not going to be able to eliminate it entirely, but I do think that some of the irritation level and the unhappiness that I know is out there of people who are either deciding not to come to the States or find when they come it's an unpleasant experience. I think some of that would go away if some of these measures towards foreigners, both resident in the United States and trying to come, would be addressed.
Elaine, I'd like to maybe disagree with you slightly about the opposition to the US is structural, that the global preponderance of the US is the only superpower, create resentment. I don't think so. The fact of the matter is that because the US is the only superpower, a lot of countries, in fact most countries, whichever region that you look to, wants to be good friends with the US. In the Asia-Pacific region, I think it's very, very clear, economically, politically, and also on security issues, most of these countries look more towards the US. I mean, people in ASEAN, for example, when it comes to security, there's always a fear of China up there. It's always been that the key security outlook of a lot of Asia-Pacific countries has always been that while we don't like to have the US on top, we like to have it on tap. So, Yankees go home, but take us with you, that kind of things.
The rest of the world really does want to believe in America. There's an enormous respect, there's an enormous admiration, there's enormous belief in the vitality and example of the American lifestyle. And there was, after 9/11, a genuine tidal wave of international sentiment. I travel all the time, I know, it was tangible. And it's just a tragedy that that's been blown, not so much because of the direction that Americans have taken on key issues like Saddam and so on, which are entirely defensible, but the way it's been done. The problem is not American power, the problem is American unilateralism, or sometimes it seems almost American solipsism, the inability to believe that anyone else exists, let alone matters. And I mean, if that's what just has to change, and if it does change, the world will be a hell of a lot better place and we'll be a lot more upbeat when we meet in 12 months' time.
Well, thank you all to the panelists. I know the Bush administration will have some officials present here in Davos, and I'm sure they will have a chance to respond to some of the rather pointed remarks that would be made. I guess the message of this panel was that America should be on tap, and it should be on tap to fix the Middle East peace process, to only go to war in Iraq after Iraq has given it a casus belli, and to exercise more care in its rhetoric. But that's just this panel's summary that I would give. But thank you to all the panelists and all the participants.